Today I'm giving my PC a much needed cleanup and replacing the thermal paste on both the GPU and CPU. It's been 5 years since I built this machine and I figured the thermal paste could use a refresh. Recently I replaced the thermal paste on 2 of my old PCs, which still have GTX 970s in them. That thermal paste was so old it had dried up and turned crumbly. Not a good sign for heat transfer. A vacuum cleaner comes in handy for getting rid of that outer layer of dust. Once that's done, I'll open up the case. Surprisingly, the inside isn't too bad. There's some dust, but I've seen much worse cases. Cleaning this should be relatively easy. Next up, the GPU. I carefully took it out of the case and started opening up to replace the thermal paste. This is where things got interesting. I unscrewed all the screws on the backside, but the cooler wouldn't come off. I thought maybe the card was locked somehow or had hidden screws holding it in place. I spent some time trying different screws, even the one in tricky spots, until I realized I had been on the right track all along. Turns out I just needed to pull a little bit harder. With the cooler off, I got my first look at the thermal paste. It didn't seem too bad at first glance, but I cleaned it up. Some of it was dry and flaking off. I even had to vacuum some of it away. Here's the clean GPU, ready for the new thermal paste. To ensure proper coverage, I made a cross with the new thermal paste. Some people prefer dots, others use lines. I went with the classic cross. I think decades ago I read it in a PC magazine that the cross would be the best thing to do, so I did it. After making the thermal paste cross on the GPU, I noticed something. The packaging included a little spatula for spreading the paste. Naturally, I thought, why not use it? As I spread the paste, I quickly realized I had used way too much. It was a mess. After removing the extra paste, I managed to spread it evenly. Lesson learned, don't go overboard with the paste. Once it was ready, I reassembled the GPU and moved on to the CPU. First I removed the fan, then tackled the screws holding the cooler in place. For this I had to use a special screwdriver with a long stick and a short handle. Always fun. I cleaned off the old paste and applied a smaller cross this time, learning from my GPU experience. I spread it out nicely with a spatula, making sure to cover the surface evenly. And then it happened, the dreaded moment every PC builder fears. One of the screws slipped out of my hand and disappeared into the case. Of course, right? Classic clumsy me. To make things worse, my alarm went off. I had to pick up my kids from sports. I had no choice but to close the case with the cooler sitting a little bit tilted on the CPU and leave. When I got back, I opened up the other side of the case and there it was, the runaway screw. But getting it out wasn't easy. After 3 attempts to secure it, I finally got the cooler back on properly. By the end of it, thermal paste had gotten everywhere, on my hands, on my camera. I had to stop and clean everything before moving out. Next I reinstalled the GPU. Of course I lost another screw while doing this. I had to flip the case upside down and shake it gently to rattle the screw out. Eventually everything was back in place. I plugged in all the cables, powered the PC and waited for the monitor to show something. But nothing happened. My computer booted, but the screen stayed black. After all that work and stress, should I have just left the dust and the old thermal paste alone? And then it hit me. Or maybe some of you sharp-eyed viewers already noticed. I forgot to connect the GPU power cables. Classic mistake. Finally I booted up the system and this time it worked. All the cleaning, thermal paste replacing and adventures had paid off. So what did I learn? Even with a bit of chaos, cleaning your PC and refreshing thermal paste can make a big difference. And yes, double check your power cables. Thanks for watching, and if you had similar PC building mishaps, let me know in the comments. See you in the next video.